Well, Queensland MP George Christensen is firm on his stance on China, saying Australia should not give in to their bullying tactics. The federal MP has fired off a personal letter to the Chinese ambassador, calling for him to answer questions about boycotting Australian products amid ongoing trade tensions. Joining me now from our Canberra studio is the member for Dawson, George Christensen. George, thank you for joining us tonight on Sky News across Australia. What did you say to the Chinese ambassador? It's a pleasure, mate. What did you say to the Chinese ambassador?
Well, I told the Chinese ambassador, Ambassador Chang, that the Parliament's Trade and Investment Growth Committee was holding an inquiry which the terms of reference were directly related to China. What we've got is terms of reference in that committee that refer to whether we've put too many eggs in the one basket, what the advantages and disadvantages of that, and I'm talking about with our exports, and quite clearly we have. We're looking at what is the impact on our national economic security and also the national interest. We're also looking at foreign investment and particularly state-owned corporations and their investment in Australia. Once again, that issue pertains pretty much to just China. So I think it's in China's interest that they send someone from the embassy to come and speak with us, and that's what I suggested that the ambassador actually do.
And yet, George, they're not returning calls from Beijing. We've seen Trade Minister Simon Birmingham has put in a few calls, even a couple of days ago. We've seen the latest with the abattoir, implications. I mean, what sort of game do you think these guys are playing right now?
Oh, well, look, the Trade Minister and the Foreign Minister both say we're not in a trade war. And I take them at their word because they're smarter people than myself when it comes to these matters. So they've got the whole department behind them analysing it. But, it just is very coincidental that after Australia comes out and makes a pretty firm statement that we need to have an international inquiry into the origins of the pandemic, that we have that sort of response where suddenly our barley exports are held up, suddenly beef exports are being held up into China. And look, the Prime Minister's absolutely 100% right on this. We need that international inquiry. If we don't know what happened, how are we going to fix what might happen in the future? So that's important, and it's not something that should be inflammatory, but yet China's handling this so badly, and you've got to say that why would you not want an inquiry if there was nothing to see here?
Exactly.
Apart from if there was something to see.
Yeah, I mean,
and I think that there is something to
George,
see.
Well, that's the issue here, isn't it? Why are they so resistant to actually trying to get to the bottom of this? Because we need to get to the bottom of it to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Because we've heard so many theories from them. I mean, did it come from a wet market? That was one theory. They're now saying it didn't. There was researchers in China itself saying that it come from the Institute of Virology that's 300 metres from that wet market. Then there's claims that, the real tinfoil hat claims that it was planted by the CIA. So there's all of these sort of different views going out there that are being put forward by the Chinese Communist Party as to the origins of this virus. We really need to know where it come from, what happened to have that spread all the way around the world, because 5 million people left Wuhan at the same time they were locking down that populace from that city to the rest of China. So they weren't spreading the virus throughout China, but it was being spread internationally and with the government's approval over there. And that's affected our economy here. I mean, I've got businesses in the Whitsundays, it's in my electorate. People have poured their life's work and life savings into these tourism businesses. They're now just about in ashes. So this is a serious issue. We need to understand it to know the cause of this event.
What do you say, George, to those captains of industry? I'm thinking about someone like Twiggy Forrest, who seem to kowtow to the Chinese.
Yeah, well, we hear this from the corporate shells. We're hearing it from the Labor shells as well. Thank goodness unions like the AWU are standing up to speak for the average Aussie worker. But, this idea that we need to put profits ahead of patriotism, we need to put the dollar and the pursuit of the Chinese yuan ahead of our country is just irresponsible. I mean, the stuff we heard out of the Australia-China Business Council the other day, that our security agencies, I mean, the men and women that keep us safe in this country, our security agencies are apparently responsible for economic harm. And that was just a shocking statement that was made by that council. And those sort of people should hang their head in shame. I mean, we've got Team Australia at the moment, and we all need to be behind Team Australia in this event, because, you know, cracks in the armour, a big bully, a big coercive, threatening bully, authoritarian regime like China will just drive straight through those cracks.
Before we go, George, how's the community at Moranbah handling, you know, this terrible tragedy that we saw where 5 miners are currently clinging to their life?
Yeah, look, it's absolutely shocking and devastating what's happened out there at the bar with that explosion, and really we need to get to the bottom of that. I do hope that the state government pulls out all stops to find out what was the cause here, and you know, we need to put things in place to ensure it doesn't happen again. There's been one too many deaths, in fact much more than that, in the mining industry lately. I think that the one key thing is that we need the mining inspectorate out and on the ground a lot more than what they are, and checking out the health and safety measures that are on mine sites.
Yeah, here, I think that's absolutely important, and I know that you know, when that inquiry is held, that state government inquiry is held, there'll be a lot of people who'll be very interested to hear some of the evidence that emerges. George Christensen, great to see you tonight.
Thanks very much, Gleeson.